Hello there. I'm glad you've slipped into this little pocket of quiet with me tonight. Outside the world of to-do lists and glowing screens, there's a softer place where questions move slowly, like lanterns floating down a dark river. In that hush, it's easier to wonder about strange, gentle things, like whether every moment, every thought, every flicker of light leaves a trace somewhere in the deep fabric of reality. Tonight, we'll wander through that idea together. The universe, not just as empty space and distant stars, but as something that might keep a kind of memory of motions, patterns, echoes that never quite fade. We'll move unhurried, letting each thought settle before the next one arrives, following the threads that tie atoms, stars, and human lives into one long, quiet story. If this kind of soft, late-night wandering brings you comfort, you're welcome to leave a like and a gentle subscribe so others can find this calm too. When you're ready, let your attention drift with me, and we'll step quietly into the mystery. If you stay just as you are for a moment, without trying to change anything, you can almost feel how the world is holding you in place. Whatever is beneath you, the mattress, the chair, the quiet floor has agreed to carry your weight for a while. And above that, even if there are ceilings and roofs and clouds in the way, there is a sky. If we could gently lift all of that aside, there would be stars waiting there, hundreds, thousands, scattered like small, steady embers. Each one, a little glowing record, sending not a message from now, but from a long time ago. That's the first soft secret in all of this. Every time you look at a star, you're really looking into the past. Light doesn't arrive instantly. It has to travel, step by patient step, across the emptiness. A star 100 light years away sent the light you're seeing 100 years ago. A star 1,000 light years away began that journey 1,000 years ago. By the time it reaches your eyes, the star itself has already changed. You are not seeing how it is, you are seeing how it was. Hidden in that simple idea is something quietly astonishing. The night sky isn't just a view, it's a kind of archive. Every star, every thin shimmer, every faint, cold ray is like an old photograph that never quite fades. The universe isn't just stretching outward as time goes by, it's also storing these traces. The particles that make up starlight don't flick on and off like a lamp being switched. They leave, they travel. Once they set out, they move in straight lines unless something bends their path, and they keep going. Some of those photons will wander for billions of years, sliding past planets, drifting around dust clouds, threading their way between whole galaxies, uninterrupted and unbothered, still holding the imprint of the moment they were born. They carry a tiny snapshot of the conditions at their source, the heat, the motion, the environment. A silent, stubborn memory of what once was. And then, very far from where they started, there is you, your eyes, the glass of a telescope, a mirror aimed just so these become the ending of the journey. When that ancient light finally reaches you, when it brushes the surface of your eye or the sensor of a camera, its long flight is over. For a heartbeat of time, that little piece of history becomes visible, becomes part of your awareness. It doesn't explain itself, it doesn't narrate, but it exists in you now, and that is enough to make its story real. Most days, it's easy to forget this. We flick on electric lights without thinking. Screens glow and change. Pictures slide past our gaze in endless streams. Information comes so quickly that nothing seems to linger. But above that, rush beyond the wires, beyond the roofs, and the noise the universe keeps sending its memories in the only language it has, light. And once you start to sit with that thought, it begins to grow stranger in a gentle, fascinating way. If light can carry memories across space, then space itself isn't empty at all. It's full of messages, full of old signals, full of data that hasn't been erased. What looks like a dark, silent gap between stars is actually a slow, patient archive. But light is only one way the universe remembers. There is another, gravity. It seems like such a plain thing, just the pull that keeps you in your bed, the tug that makes a dropped object fall, the quiet glue that keeps the moon near the earth. It feels ordinary. It feels almost dull. Yet underneath that simplicity, gravity is also a kind of memory. When a planet pulls on its moon, when a star tugs gently on a passing comet, when a black hole bends the path of anything that strays too close, all of that happens because of where mass is, because of what is present, because of the way matter has gathered. Gravity isn't a force that simply decides to act. It's a consequence of how space has been shaped by mass. It's the record of where things are, pressed into the very geometry of the universe. You can think of it as the memory of mass written into space. A heavy object doesn't just sit there. It curves the space around it. It changes the way other things move, not because it pushes them, but because the space they're moving through is no longer flat. It's bent, dented, reshaped by what has been placed there. In that sense, even motion itself is a form of memory. The path a planet takes around a star isn't random. It can be predicted because it follows the shape carved out by gravity. Gravity follows mass. Mass marks space, the swirling dance of planets, moons, satellites, and specks of dust is not a free improvisation. It's a choreography written by the weight and placement of everything that has gathered there. So space is not just an empty background for things to move through. It is something that remembers where those things are and where they have been. It shapes the future trajectories of objects by holding on to the imprint of the past. If that feels too vast, you can shrink it down to something very small. Picture a single rock resting quietly on the ground. You reach down, lift it, and place it a little to the side. That's all. Such a tiny act. But even that simple movement changes the gravity around you. The distribution of mass has shifted. The gravitational field has adjusted. The change is microscopic, far too subtle for your senses to pick up, but it's real. You have altered the layout of mass in the universe, and space has responded. Not with a dramatic wave or a visible ripple, but with a new arrangement, a new pattern. That shift will never entirely vanish. It will spread out, thin and diffuse beyond our ability to measure. But the fact that it happened is now part of the universe's story. The same is true with something as ordinary as a light switch. When you flip it, an electric current flows through the wires and a bulb glows. At the same time, the electromagnetic field in the room changes. Again, not by very much, but enough that with delicate instruments, someone could tell that something occurred. They could know that a current had flowed, that a choice had been made, that an action took place. Even if you turn the light off again, the trace of what happened doesn't simply vanish from reality. Every interaction leaves behind a whisper. Every motion, every small spark, every heartbeat nudges the fields that surround us. Human memory doesn't work like this. Our minds are built to forget. Names slip away. Faces blur at the edges. Whole days or conversations can dissolve into a haze. Forgetting isn't a failure. It's a feature that lets us move forward without carrying every detail. But the universe doesn't forget in that same way. It may not remember with thoughts or feelings, but it holds on to everything in its own language, in photons and particles, in the arrangement of matter, in the shape of fields and the curves of space-time. Every collision, every chemical reaction, every twist of a molecule leaves some mark somewhere, not on paper or in a diary, but in the way things are now, compared to how they were a moment before. That idea leads into something even more mysterious. If the universe remembers, where exactly is that memory stored? Some of it is in the light racing through space. Some of it is in gravity and the shapes it draws. But there are theories that suggest the memory runs deeper, down into the foundation of reality itself, into the quantum fields that underpin everything. One of those ideas is sometimes called the Holographic Principle. It sounds like science fiction, but it comes from serious physics. A hologram, in everyday terms, is a flat, two-dimensional surface that can store information about a three-dimensional scene. When you shine light through it in the right way, the full three-dimensional image appears. The proposal is that the universe might behave a little as if it were like that. The information inside a region of space, every particle, every interaction, could be encoded on the surface that surrounds it. It sounds impossible, but when physicists study certain models of black holes, the math seems to insist that this is how information survives. Black holes pose a puzzle. If you throw something into one, a book, a star, anything, the matter falls in and appears to be lost. But the information about what it was cannot just disappear, or the rules of physics begin to break. To fix this, some theories suggest that the information doesn't vanish at all. Instead, it gets smeared across the event horizon, the invisible boundary around the black hole stored there in unimaginably fine detail, like data on a cosmic storage surface. We can't read it, but in these models, it's still there, preserved rather than destroyed. And if black holes might store information on their edges, some physicists wonder whether the universe as a whole could be doing something similar. Maybe everything that happens inside a region of space is also echoed on its boundaries. Maybe your presence, listening in the dark right now, is written into the fabric around you as a gentle adjustment, a soft line of code, not noise, but signal. These ideas are still being debated and tested. They're not settled facts, but even without them, there is a quieter truth that's easier to see. The universe holds on to change. The earth under your feet does it all the time. Think of fossils pressed into stone shells, leaves, bones, tiny creatures that once moved and breathed, now preserved as shapes in rock that used to be molten and flowing. Or cores of ice, drawn from deep inside ancient glaciers. Layer by layer, they trap bubbles of old air, tiny samples of atmospheres from thousands of years ago. Each ring in a tree trunk tells how many seasons it has witnessed, how plentiful or harsh those years were. Canyons carve their memories into their own walls, remembering the path of water that wore them into being. You don't need any magic to find these memories. You just have to pay attention, to look at the patterns of cracks, layers, rings, and scars. The world is covered in slow handwriting. Far above all of that, the light continues to pour in. Starlight, the glow of distant galaxies, the sudden outbursts of quasars, the faint hush of radio waves. Everything is still traveling, still carrying the shapes of the past with it. If the stars are old messages, if the light above us is a kind of memory moving through space, it's natural to wonder if the sky, in its own way, remembers you as well. not just as a metaphor, not just as a poetic feeling, but as a literal, physical question. When you walk under the open sky, when you pause and look up, does anything out there change because you are there? Does anything respond, even subtly? Could the presence of a single person, one body, one breath, one quiet heartbeat alter the universe's shape, even a little? Many people, at least once, have stood under a clear night and felt something wordless rise inside them. Not quite fear, not only awe, something closer to recognition, as if the darkness above isn't empty at all, but full of attention. You might have felt it too, alone outside, watching your breath blur in cold air, wrapped in the hush of the dark, feeling that the stars overhead are not just distant suns, but a steady presence, familiar somehow, as if they've been expecting you. In one sense, they have. When you stand beneath them, you're not simply observing, you're completing a story. The light that reaches you has spent ages crossing the void, threaded through the curves of gravity, slipping between clouds of dust, all to arrive at exactly where you are, at exactly the moment you chose to look up. If you hadn't been there, that beam of light would have continued past, carrying its message somewhere else. Instead, its journey ends with you. It becomes part of your experience, your memory. That matters. You were part of the equation. The light's path and your presence intersected, and that intersection is now a fact of the universe. But there is another layer to this connection. In that same moment, you are not just receiving, you are also sending. You may not shine like a star, but your body is warm. It glows in infrared, radiating heat into the space around you. Tiny electromagnetic ripples leak from your devices, from the circuits in your phone, from the signals hopping between towers and satellites. Even in stillness, you are never completely quiet. All of that spreads outward. It seeps through walls, flows into the street, rises into the open air. It weakens as it goes, thinning and dispersing, but it doesn't simply wink out of existence. With the right instruments and enough sensitivity, someone could tell that you were there. They could measure the warmth you gave off, the shift in the electromagnetic field, the extra noise in the radio band. They could say, at this time, in this place, something happened, someone existed. And if that is true in a room or on a street, it is true on a planet. For more than a century, humans have been sending signals into the sky without really meaning to. Early radio shows, emergency broadcasts, music, news, static, conversations no one remembers now. All of that has been racing outward at the speed of light, forming an expanding bubble of human-made noise around our world. Those signals are faint now. They get stretched and tangled by distance, but they are still there, moving through the darkness. The patch of sky above you is not blank. It is full of these echoes, some natural, some made by us, all woven together. If you've ever made a call, streamed a song, sent a message that bounced off a satellite, some tiny part of that is out there too, somewhere, still on its way. The universe doesn't organize these signals, doesn't file them in folders labeled and neat. It doesn't translate them into meaning, but it doesn't erase them either. They happen, and once they do, the fields and particles they disturb cannot go back to exactly how they were before. Most of these traces fade into background noise. They mix, blur, and become part of a general hum. But fading is not the same as never having existed. For a brief time, when those signals were strongest near their source, the universe's pattern was different because of them, because of you. That is the quiet, physical truth at the heart of all this. Memory, in the language of physics, doesn't require intention. It doesn't need a mind to write it down or a heart to care about it. To leave a mark on the universe, you don't have to try. You simply have to be. By existing in space and time, you change what passes through you and around you. You absorb some light, you emit some warmth, you bend gravity in a measurable fraction, you disturb electromagnetic fields in ways too small to feel, and those disturbances ripple outward, contributing to the pattern of reality in countless tiny ways. So when you lie under the sky and something inside you stirs, when you feel as though there is a kind of listening happening in both directions, that feeling is not entirely imagined. You are receiving the universe's long-held memories in the form of light and air and stone, and at the same time, the universe is receiving your presence as a small but real adjustment to its own state. No thoughts are exchanged, no words are spoken, but there is still a kind of conversation, a loop of cause and effect, of influence and response. Starlight leaves its mark on you. Your warmth, your motion, your signals leave their mark on the fields and particles around you. If you wonder whether that truly counts as memory, whether something without a brain or a story can really remember, that question sits right at the edge of modern physics. Because in physics, memory can mean something very simple, a system that has been changed by what has passed through it. Fields that stretch across emptiness, the electromagnetic field, the Higgs field, the curved fabric of space-time itself are sensitive. They respond when something moves, when something vibrates, when something exists for a moment and then is gone. Afterward, they are not quite the same. Their new state is a quiet record of what has been. In those tiny shifts, the memory is written. Space doesn't need ink or paper. It keeps its record in distance and shape. Physicists even have a name for one clear example of this: the gravitational memory effect. When a gravitational wave passes through, say, from two distant black holes spiraling together, it briefly stretches and squeezes space-time. Tiny test particles would jiggle as the wave moves by. But when the wave has gone and the ripples have faded, those particles don't drift back to exactly where they began. They stay ever so slightly displaced, as if space itself remembers having been pulled. That isn't fantasy. It falls straight out of general relativity, where gravity is the bending of space-time. A passing wave leaves behind a lasting change, a faint, permanent after, written into the pattern of distances. Space keeps a subtle scar. So when you wonder whether the sky remembers you, you don't need to imagine eyes watching. You can think of it like this instead. The universe is sensitive. When mass moves or energy flows, it leaves a trace in the geometry itself. It keeps the warmth of your body as a small nudge in the surrounding radiation field, your signals as ripples in the invisible radio sea, the particles you push aside each time you turn over, the atoms you displace with every breath. You leave a trail, even in what feels like complete stillness. There is another kind of memory that lives on smaller, stranger scales. It belongs to quantum physics, where particles refuse to move in single, neat lines. In that world, things don't follow just one path. They explore many paths at once, like a faint fog of options. What you finally see is one outcome chosen from that cloud of possibilities, but the others, the ways things could have gone, don't simply vanish. They linger in the equations, interfering with one another, quietly changing the chances of what you do see. In some interpretations of quantum theory, this becomes a kind of shadow memory, the memory of what could have happened, woven into what actually did. It's not easy to picture yourself that way, as a haze of probabilities instead of a crisp single line. Yet that is part of the physics, part of the memory. The full system still knows the shape of your might have beens. In that sense, the sky doesn't just hold the signals you actually send. It is steeped in patterns of possibility, written in the underlying quantum fields that ripple through what we call empty space. That, too, is a kind of memory. All of this can sound remote, like something that lives only in chalk on a blackboard far from your quiet room. But if you lie still and let your thoughts move gently through it, something soft changes. Silence stops feeling like absence. The dark above your ceiling becomes a responsive medium, not because it thinks, but because it reacts. Even if no one else notices you today, even if your hours pass in almost complete quiet, the universe has already registered that you are here. Molecules in the air have brushed your skin and altered their paths. Photons have bounced off your hands and eyes and gone off changed. Electrons in wires and circuits have shifted slightly because of your warmth and movement. The sky, and everything beyond it, has felt that touch in its own small way. It will not undo it. It may never assign it meaning, but it will keep the change. So the question softens from, does the sky remember you, to, is anything ever truly forgotten? Maybe the stars are not looking down in any personal sense, but they are shining outward, sending their memories into the dark, and the faint light you send back, quiet, constant, unremarked, threads itself into that same pattern. There is a gentle comfort in knowing that light doesn't forget its origin. It simply continues. A photon travels in straight, patient resilience, unless something bends or absorbs it. Every beam of light you have ever seen, every sunset, every reflection, every tiny point of starlight began somewhere else. A long time ago, it did not appear for you. It began in a place you will likely never visit, at a time you will never stand inside. Light is both traveler and courier. It crosses great distances, not just because it is fast, but because it does not stop. If you stood beneath a clear night sky and picked out a star a few hundred light years away, the light reaching you tonight would have left that star before your grandparents were born. That light has been traveling your entire life, and many lives before yours, not because it meant to, but because that is how light behaves. When it finally arrives at your eye, at your window, at the surface of your skin, it doesn't bring a sentence in words. It brings a pattern, a particular color, a certain energy, a fingerprint of the conditions at its birth. The star as it was then, not as it is now. In that sense, every time you look at a star, you are watching its memory, not its present. And that is true of everything you see. The light bouncing off a friend's face has to cross the space between you, and that takes time. The delay is tiny, but real. When you see someone smile, you are always seeing it just after it has already happened. We call it now because the gap is too small to feel, but strictly speaking, all sight is of the past. A moonbeam is about 1.5 seconds old when it reaches you. Sunlight takes just over 8 minutes. From the nearest star beyond the sun, light needs more than 4 years. The farther the source, the deeper into history you look whenever you open your eyes. Light is not just illumination, it is record-keeping. Once a photon has been sent out, it preserves its character across distances that strain imagination. It may be diluted as it spreads, or stretched to longer wavelengths as the universe expands, making it redder and cooler, but the imprint of its origin remains. This is how we know what the early universe was like. No one stood there to watch the first atoms form, yet the light from that era is still moving, still arriving. The faint, almost uniform glow we call the cosmic microwave background is the oldest light we can detect. It has been crossing space for over 13 billion years, carrying tiny patterns that tell us how matter was arranged back then. It scatters off walls, threads through windows, reflects from dust and fabric and skin. Some of it warms you. Some of it outlines the shapes you see. Much of it slips by, unremarked, fading into what we call background. Still, all of it is carrying information from place to place, tying separate moments together. You can flip off a light switch, but the photons that left the bulb before that instant are already on their way, sliding past furniture, through air, through glass, into the wider world. They join the quiet traffic of light that fills space. A photon, once created, does not rest. It does not slow down or decay in mid-flight. In its own strange frame, the moment it is born and the moment it is absorbed are the same. For light, there is no in-between. For us, standing inside time, that in-between can stretch across billions of years, and every photon becomes a tiny bridge between then and now. A photograph is just a net thrown over a few of them. When you look at a picture from long ago, what you are really seeing is the light that bounced off that moment and was stopped by a camera. That light might have gone on, but instead it was frozen into patterns of dark and bright, a message from the past held still. Most light is never caught in that way. It pours out of windows and doors, slips through gaps, reflects off clouds and metal and leaves, and disappears into the larger ocean of radiation. There is more history moving through space right now than any library could hold. Beams from stars that died before Earth formed oceans, echoes of blazing quasars that shone before our sun existed, signals in the form of light that have been in transit longer than life has walked this planet. Some of that light is passing through you right now. You don't feel it. It slips through the layers of your skin, scattering off atoms, bending slightly around bone. Some photons are absorbed and their energy becomes warmth inside you. Others are redirected, sent off on new paths. You are not just a receiver of light. You are a surface along its journey, a place where its story changes direction. Every second, the light touching your body is recording where you are not in words, but in the way it bounces and warms and scatters. When that light leaves, if it reflects or glows away, it carries a trace of you, not your name or your memories, but your position, your outline, the bare fact that you occupied this place at this time. Even when you are resting, wrapped in darkness, you are still shaping the light around you. You can dim the lamps and sit in shadow, but you cannot call those photons back. They have already joined the stream. The light bouncing off your skin in this moment is already part of the signal. That isn't superstition. It's just how the world works. So if you think of light as gentle, a warm bedside glow, a soft beam across a floor, that is true. But it is also relentless and thorough. It moves whether or not you notice. It doesn't forget what it has touched. The next time you lift your eyes to the stars, you can remember this. You are not just seeing them in the only way the universe sees, through the exchange of light and energy. You are also being seen. Your body is outlined against the darkness, visible even to the indifferent silence of space. Light, then, is not only information, it is connection. It links distant places and distant times, threads together the surface of a star and the lenses in your eyes, you and the wider fabric of space. As you rest here, held by the quiet pull that keeps you on your bed instead of drifting away, another thought begins to settle. If light is the way the universe remembers through motion, gravity may be the way it remembers through shape. Not just what holds you here, or curves, orbits, or makes things fall, but something that stores change in the very geometry of space itself. We grow up treating gravity as background, so familiar it almost disappears. You drop something and it falls. You lie down and you stay put. You don't drift toward the ceiling in your sleep. Gravity does all of this softly, without fuss. And yet, for something so constant, it's striking how rarely we ask what it truly is. We picture it as a pull, a downward tug, a force acting on every bit of mass, but that picture is only half the story. Beneath that everyday feeling, gravity is also a record carved into space-time, a kind of memory, not written in light, but in shape. According to general relativity, gravity isn't really a hidden hand pulling things together at all. It's the shape of space itself, changing in response to mass. A planet, a star, even your own body, presses into the fabric of space-time and leaves a small indentation there. What you feel as down is not a string tugging from below, but the gentle slope of that curved space quietly guiding your path. You're not being yanked toward Earth, you're sliding along the geometry that Earth has drawn around itself, following the contours of a cosmic landscape that has been reshaped by everything that has ever had weight. Space, in that sense, isn't like a springy mattress that snaps perfectly back as soon as you step away. It's more like soft clay that keeps a fingerprint. The more massive something is, the deeper the hollow it presses into space-time, and those hollows can stretch across vast distances. The moon isn't held to Earth by an invisible rope. It just can't ignore the valley in space-time that Earth's mass has carved. Its orbit is a long, graceful slide along that curve. Seen this way, gravity becomes a kind of memory. The presence of mass changes the structure of space, and that structure decides how everything else moves. A planet remembers the star it circles, not with thoughts, but with motion. Its path is the result of the star's imprint. Comets, dust, satellites, entire streams of gas, none of them are choosing their routes. They are tracing out the shapes that other masses have already written into space-time. Even when things drift away, collapse, or explode, the influence they had is carried on in the geometry. Physicists talk about gravitational memory and mean it literally. When massive objects move violently, when black holes spiral together and merge, for instance, they create gravitational waves, ripples in space-time that race outward at the speed of light. As those waves pass through a region, they gently stretch and squeeze the distances between points. And when the waves have gone, the points they passed don't quite return to their original separations. There is a tiny, permanent offset. Space doesn't reset perfectly. It remembers having been disturbed. Those ripples carry the shape of the event that created them, the mass of the objects, the way they orbited, the rhythm of their final plunge. Long after the collision is over, its pattern lives on in the waves moving through the cosmos. When a gravitational wave passes by Earth, it leaves behind a mark, a minuscule shift in the geometry of space that lingers. Instruments built with long tunnels and laser beams have actually seen this happen, noticing changes in length many times smaller than the width of a proton, delicate but real. It's easy to file that away as something that happens far off in extreme corners of the universe. But the same idea applies here, in your ordinary, quiet life. Your body has mass, and mass curves space-time. Compared to a planet, your contribution is tiny, but it isn't zero. The space around you, bends ever so slightly under your presence. If we could zoom in with impossible precision, we'd see that the geometry near you is a little different from what it would be if you weren't here. Every time you sit down, turn over, or stretch out to rest, that small curve moves with you. The world is constantly adjusting its shape to wrap around your weight. You're not just feeling gravity. You are part of the network that creates it. If a narrow beam of light or a stream of particles passed very close to your body, their paths would bend by a minute amount because of you, because of the way your mass reshapes space-time in your neighborhood. In that sense, your existence writes faint, continuous lines into the structure of the universe. At the same time, you're riding on curves much bigger than your own. Earth wraps its indentation in space-time around you. So does the Sunday, so does the galaxy, and the cluster of galaxies beyond that. What you feel as weight is your body trying to move in what would be a straight line, and discovering that the straightest path available points toward the center of the Earth. Gravity isn't so much tugging you downward as quietly redefining what straight ahead means. The slope you feel has a very long history. It was shaped by cold clouds of gas collapsing under their own gravity, by stars kindling and going out, by heavy elements forming in stellar cores and drifting into space, by rock and metal collecting into planets. The geometry that keeps you resting on your bed tonight is the product of billions of years of matter gathering and rearranging itself. Every atom inside Earth has contributed to the curvature you're lying in now. Gravity doesn't let go because space-time keeps the shape that history carved into it. It can change, but it doesn't forget. Even when something dramatic happens, a star exploding, a shell of gas rushing outward at astonishing speeds, the memory of where that mass once was doesn't vanish in an instant. The gravitational influence continues, then gradually updates as the matter spreads. The change moves outward like a message written in the curvature, and the universe adjusts. It never erases the fact that something occurred. It simply folds new information into the old pattern. So when you wonder whether the universe remembers you, gravity offers one quiet answer. You have mass. That mass curves space-time. The curve is part of the total shape of the cosmos, no matter how small. You are not just resting in the gravitational story of the universe, you're written into it. You are one of the reasons the fabric looks exactly the way it does and not some other way. You don't have to do anything special. You only have to exist, and the geometry takes note. If you've ever dropped a pebble into a calm pond, you've seen ripples spread out in delicate rings. Eventually they fade, and the surface looks smooth again. But down among the water molecules, things are not exactly as they were. Motions have changed. Tiny currents have formed and vanished. Energies have been shuffled around. The pool carries a slightly new arrangement, an imprint of that one small disturbance. Space-time behaves in a similar spirit. The ripples stirred up by masses and motions smooth out, but the underlying state remembers they were there. When you scale this up, the sky becomes even more intricate. The stars overhead are not just points of light. They are heavy bodies sinking deeply into space-time. Their gravity reaches across light years, shaping the orbits of neighboring stars, the formation of planets, the turning of entire spiral arms. Even when a star dies, the influence it had does not simply wink out. It may leave behind a white dwarf, a neutron star, or a black hole, but the surrounding geometry still bears the stamp of the mass that once burned there. A black hole is gravity taken to an extreme. Its curvature is so intense that it creates a boundary, the event horizon, beyond which not even light can escape. Yet from the outside, a black hole is less a cosmic vacuum cleaner than a very deep well in space-time. Objects fall toward it because they are following the steepest straight lines available in that distorted geometry. The black hole doesn't reach out and grab them. It simply exists, and in existing, it sculpts the paths around it. That sculpting is a stubborn form of memory. If you think of memory as anything that preserves something of the past and guides what comes next, gravity fits quietly into that definition. It keeps track of where mass has collected, and that record steers the future motion of everything nearby. From the first wisps of matter after the Big Bang to the swirl of gas that would become Earth, every clump and drift has helped write the gravitational landscape. You are living inside that long, unbroken story. And even in sleep, you continue it, adding your own small curvature to the sum. People sometimes say the universe is indifferent, that space doesn't care what we do. In one sense, that's true. Space-time doesn't judge or choose. It has no preferences, but it does respond. It reshapes itself around every gram of matter and every burst of energy. It holds the changes that have been made. It does not simply reset and forget. What surrounds you is not a blank void, but a flexible fabric that bends with you, and because of you, a quiet background that listens with geometry instead of ears. From here, it's natural to think about the places we casually call empty. The black gaps between stars, the broad, dark gulfs between galaxies on maps and in models. They often get labeled simply as space, as if they were nothing more than the distance between real things. But emptiness is mostly a convenient shortcut. When you look more closely, even the loneliest regions are busy. Far from any planet or star, the density of matter is incredibly low, maybe only a few stray atoms in each cubic centimeter, sometimes less. To you and me, that might as well be nothing. Yet those atoms are still there, drifting under the influence of electric and magnetic fields, nudged by passing light. They bump into one another now and then, exchange a little energy, and move on. Their motions quietly store the history of every encounter. Threaded through this thin gas is light of many kinds: radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays. Some of it comes from nearby stars, some from distant galaxies, some from ancient explosions whose visible remains have long faded. A star that blew apart thousands of years ago in a galaxy you'll never see is still sending out light and particles. They don't vanish when no one is watching. They simply travel on. Because space offers almost no resistance, these signals can last for astonishing lengths of time. They spread out and grow weaker, but unless something absorbs them, they keep going. That means the regions we call empty are filled with old messages, overlapping and intertwined. They are faint, so faint we need extraordinary instruments to detect them, but they are real. Many of them are passing through you right now, through the walls and roof around you, unnoticed. Some of our most sensitive observatories are designed not to stare straight at bright, obvious objects, but to listen to this in-between. Radio telescopes can pick up the soft hiss of ancient radiation coming from every direction in the sky. That's how we found the cosmic microwave background, the cooled afterglow of the early universe, a uniform, low murmur left over from when the cosmos was very young. That signal had been traveling the whole time, waiting for detectors quiet enough to hear it. It isn't only light that wanders through these wide spaces. High-energy particles race between stars and galaxies too. Cosmic rays, fast fragments of atoms, spend millions or billions of years crossing the void. Neutrinos, those almost ghost-like particles, stream out from nuclear reactions in stars, from supernovas, from the hearts of galaxies. Most of them pass straight through planets, people, even entire galaxies without interacting at all. Right now, uncountable numbers of them are moving through your body every second, carrying tiny parcels of energy from events you'll never see. The universe rarely keeps its energy confined. When something dramatic happens, a flare on a star, a burst from a black hole, a collision between dense objects, the effects are not limited to that location. Photons, particles, and waves are flung outward like ink in water, diffusing through the cosmos. The event is over in one place, but its consequences continue elsewhere, softened and thinned, yet still in motion. Even gravity sends its echoes into these seeming deserts. When two black holes merge, the gravitational waves they create don't just travel through regions rich with matter. They sweep through the wide, sparse spaces as well, stretching and squeezing the fabric itself by tiny amounts. You wouldn't feel it, but the change is there. Detectors on Earth noticed this not by watching stars, but by monitoring the length of laser beams in long, quiet tunnels. When a wave passed, the distances between mirrors shifted by less than the width of a proton, but it was enough to say that something powerful had happened far away. So the emptiest places are not blank stages waiting for events. They are archives. They hold layered echoes of ancient motions and collisions, of matter bending and springing back, of energy that once gathered and then flowed outward. Just as you receive these whispers through the light that reaches your eyes, through the particles that slip through your body, you also add your own. Earth is not a silent bystander drifting in darkness. Our planet glows in infrared, reflecting sunlight back into space and shedding its own warmth. Storms crackle with radio waves. Lightning and auroras lace the upper atmosphere with electromagnetic patterns. And for a little more than a century, human technology has added its own signals: radio broadcasts, television transmissions, radar pings, messages to and from satellites. Some of that energy leaks past the atmosphere and escapes into the wider universe. Those earliest broadcasts are now many light years away, expanding in a thin, uneven shell. Old songs, distant voices, beeps from early experiments diluted and scrambled, but still present in principle. A patient civilization with a huge receiver might catch hints of these signals as they pass. They wouldn't hear a clear program. They might not recognize it as speech, but they would know that once something organized and noisy was here. And it isn't only the deliberate transmissions. Every engine that burns fuel, every spark, every stretch of high-voltage wire, every burst of data from device to device adds a little to Earth's electromagnetic fingerprint. Much of it dies out near home, but some of it seeps outward. It becomes part of the quiet storm of radiation moving through space. So when you imagine the vacuum as silent, it helps to remember that silence in space only means the absence of air for sound. It doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Waves and particles don't need ears to be real. They don't need anyone to interpret them to count as memory. Space carries their motion faithfully. In that way, the vacuum is not empty. It is permissive. It doesn't resist or erase. It lets signals move freely, preserving the story of events in motion far better than air, water, or stone ever could. A sound here on Earth fades quickly because molecules jostle and scatter its energy. A radio wave in glass or metal is absorbed or reflected and soon loses its shape. But a wave in the openness of space can, in principle, cross the observable universe if nothing interrupts it, not because it is especially powerful, but because the medium is so gentle with it. At any given moment, the cosmos is full of happenings that haven't finished echoing yet. Old collisions, old flares, old broadcasts, old breaths of energy are all still on their way somewhere. They have left their sources behind, but they have not yet arrived at their destinations. They exist in transit, connecting what once was to what now is and to what will be. And you, resting where you are both a recipient and a contributor to that endless, drifting record. All across the universe, events that ended long ago are still quietly shaping the background as they travel outward. A star that exploded, a galaxy that flared, a radio song that was beamed into the night. Long after the moment itself has passed, its ripples keep moving as light, particles, and waves in spacetime. Folded into that slow outward drift is you as well, the warmth of your body, the faint electric fields around your nerves, the signals from your devices. None of it reaches very far compared to the size of the cosmos, but it is real, and it has joined the same great archive of echoes. What's remarkable is that none of those echoes are coordinated. There is no editor choosing what to keep, no archive sorting them. The structure of space itself holds them. The fields that fill the vacuum, the curvature of spacetime, the quantum states humming underneath it all. They respond each time something happens. They adapt, even if only by a tiny amount. They change, and in that change, a memory is written. Seen this way, memory no longer needs a brain. It only needs a medium that can be altered and doesn't instantly reset. Space is such a medium. The vacuum is alive with fields and fluctuations, and those fields keep a record simply by not going back to exactly the way they were. So if echoes are always moving forward, light that hasn't been absorbed yet, particles still in flight, waves still unfolding, loss becomes harder to define. When we say we forget, we usually mean that we can't retrieve a pattern inside our own mind. A face, a voice, a detail slips beyond reach. But if the universe keeps carrying forward the physical consequences of every moment, if the evidence continues spreading in thin rings of influence, is that the same as true erasure? Or is silence just a depth we haven't learned to listen into yet? You don't have to answer that tonight. The questions can simply sit with you, the way uncountable particles sit with you, passing through your room, your body, your bed, without asking permission. They share the space with the faint warmth you feel without thinking, warmed slightly by background radiation that has been traveling since the early universe, and with the gentle curve of gravity wrapping around your body, holding you to the earth. So when you look up at a dark sky, it may help to retire the word blank. Instead, you can think of it as layered, full of quiet evidence. And if most of space is like that, if nearly everything can carry some trace of what has happened, then there is one kind of place that seems, at first glance, to break the pattern. Black holes. You've probably heard the outline. Take something massive, let gravity win, and it collapses inward under its own weight. The matter falls into a region where space-time curves so sharply that light cannot find a way back out. The result is not an explosion, not a hole in the usual sense, but a patch of space where the slope becomes impossibly steep. Anything that strays too close, light, gas, dust, entire stars crosses a certain boundary and can no longer escape. That boundary is the event horizon. From the outside, it's like a one-way surface. Once something passes through, there are no paths that lead back to you. In this sense, a black hole isn't a cosmic vacuum cleaner tugging from a distance. It just sits, shaping the geometry, waiting for something to wander across its edge. All of that is well supported by theory and by what we've seen. Stars whipping around invisible centers, gas heating up as it spirals inward, the faint ringing of gravitational waves when black holes merge. But behind this picture is a quieter question. It isn't just, what is a black hole? It's, what does a black hole do to information? Imagine throwing something in, a photograph, a cup of tea, a small satellite, a single photon. From far away, once it slips past the event horizon, it's gone. You can't recover it or decode it. All you ever see is the black hole's mass increasing. Maybe its spin changing. Maybe its electric charge shifting. The intricate details, the image on the photograph, the arrangement of atoms in the cup seem to vanish. Everywhere else in physics, information is not supposed to be destroyed. It can be scrambled and hidden, but in principle, if you knew every detail of a system, you could run the clock backward and reconstruct what it was. Quantum mechanics is built on the idea that the evolution of a system preserves information, even if we don't know how to read it. Black holes appear to ignore that rule. Drop a poem and a plain rock into the same black hole, and from the outside, their fates look identical. The meaning of the poem and the plainness of the rock both disappear into the same dark. Physicists call this the information paradox. It's not about whether black holes are real, they are. It's about whether they break the deep principle that information written into the universe never completely vanishes. Then Stephen Hawking made it sharper. By blending quantum physics with curved spacetime, he showed that black holes are not perfectly black. They emit a faint glow, Hawking radiation arising from quantum fluctuations near the event horizon, where pairs of particles appear and one escapes. The escaping particle carries away a little energy, which means the black hole slowly loses mass. Over enormous spans of time, this trickle could cause it to evaporate completely, and if it does, the problem deepens. Everything that fell in the poem, the rock, the cup of tea, seems to be replaced by a featureless bath of radiation. No pattern, no way to reconstruct what was lost. If that's truly how it works, something in our understanding has to give. Either quantum mechanics is incomplete about how strictly information is preserved, or our picture of black holes is missing a hidden layer. To soften the paradox, people began to explore different possibilities. One suggestion is that the information remains inside, somehow stored in whatever quantum object replaces the singularity at the center. Another is that Hawking radiation is not as bland as it looks, that, in principle, the information does seep out, encoded in subtle correlations between the emitted particles, so tangled that we don't yet know how to untie them. A third idea focuses on the horizon itself. Instead of thinking of the event horizon as just a geometric boundary, you can imagine it as a kind of memory surface. Everything that falls in leaves an imprint on the horizon's microscopic structure. From far away, you only see the black hole swell and perhaps spin differently, but at the quantum level, the edge may be covered in an intricate pattern that quietly records what crossed it. This way of thinking led to something larger, the holographic principle. In everyday life, a hologram is a flat surface that stores a three-dimensional image. Shine light on it the right way, and depth appears from a thin sheet. The holographic principle takes that idea and suggests that everything inside a region of space, all the particles, fields, and interactions, could be fully described by information stored on the boundary around it. Black holes nudged physicists toward this because when they tried to calculate how much information a black hole could contain, they found that the limit didn't grow with the black hole's volume. It grew with the area of its event horizon. The maximum information content seemed to depend on surface area, not interior size. That's as if the capacity of a room to hold details was determined not by how much space is inside it, but by the size of its walls. So people began to ask, what if this area rule is not just a black hole curiosity, but a clue about space-time itself? In certain models, you can take a universe with gravity inside it and show that it is mathematically equivalent to a universe without gravity living on a lower dimensional boundary. Every event in the bulk has a partner on the edge. The two descriptions look very different, but they tell the same story. That doesn't mean you're a projection in a science fiction sense. It means there may be two complete ways to talk about the same reality, one in terms of volumes and geometry, another in terms of surfaces and information. In that view, a black hole's event horizon becomes a kind of ultimate ledger. What falls in does not vanish. It is encoded there, flattened into a pattern of quantum ripples along the horizon. We don't yet know which detailed picture of black holes is exactly right, but a theme has begun to emerge. Even in the most extreme conditions we can imagine, the universe seems stubborn about keeping its records. It may hide them behind horizons, weave them into subtle correlations, or press them into surfaces we don't know how to read, but simple erasure is the last thing it seems willing to allow. That matters because the universe is built on change. Stars collapse, planets form, particles scatter and fuse and decay. Nothing keeps its original shape forever. And yet all of these transformations follow rules. If information could truly disappear, if something could happen and leave no trace anywhere, then the chain between cause and effect would break. The structure of physics itself would begin to unravel. So far, that hasn't happened. Even black holes still obey equations that fit together. They still leave clues in their gravity, their radiation, their edges. Quietly, they suggest that what we think of as forgetting may often be something else, a kind of compression so deep and thorough that it looks like absence from where we stand. If information is always preserved, and if the capacity to store it depends on boundaries, then information begins to look less like a convenience and more like a foundation. In that view, the universe is made of information first. Matter and energy are ways that information arranges itself. Laws of physics are patterns in how information changes, how it's shuffled and shared while never quite being lost. If that's even partly true, memory stops being something that belongs only to brains. Memory becomes something space does when it is bent and doesn't unbend, something fields do when they shift and keep the new shape, something reality does by its very nature, because every change has to come from somewhere and lead to something else. You don't need the equations to feel the softness of that idea. Every time you move through a room, you leave a physical trace in the invisible structures around you, slight changes in electromagnetic fields, tiny adjustments in gravitational curvature, new paths for light to take. The information written into the world shifts because you are in it, because you turned your head, because you breathed. You are not outside the universe's memory, watching it from a distance. You are one of the ways it writes. When a rock falls into a river, the splash is temporary. The water leaps up, circles outward, then settles. Give it a few moments, and the surface looks calm again, as if nothing happened. But if you widen your view, you see that something did change. The rock has a new place on the riverbed. The currents slide differently around it. Tiny eddies appear where there were none. Grains of sand are redirected. The banks will erode in a slightly altered pattern over years and years. The splash vanished quickly. The consequences did not. That's how memory often works in the universe. The sharp, loud part of an event fades fast, What stays is the rearrangement, molecules in new positions, fields with slightly different values, energies redistributed in ways that cannot be entirely undone. Entropy keeps pushing these patterns toward diffusion, toward becoming less distinct, but along the way, new forms emerge. A groove worn into stone, a canyon carved over centuries, a planet cooled enough to grow oceans and life. The same is true in small, personal ways. A word spoken in a quiet room stirs air, shifts body chemistry, changes decisions in tiny increments. The sound waves die out almost immediately, but the arrangement of neurons, the micro-choices that follow, the habits that form afterward, all carry the imprint. Your nervous system is full of such records. Some you call memories, others live as reflexes, preferences, gut feelings. Even when you forget, the structure that forgetting leaves behind is itself a record. A pathway used often is easier to walk again. One left alone grows faint. This is the balance you live in. Entropy is always at work, gently nudging patterns toward decay, making detailed order harder to maintain. At the same time, local pockets of order keep forming and renewing themselves, spending energy to push back. Stars burn fuel to resist collapse. Cells repair damaged proteins. Brains rebuild connections in sleep. Your body quietly fights to keep its shape against a universe that tends towards spreading out. Rest is part of that fight. When you sleep, your brain doesn't shut down. It reorganizes. Memories are strengthened or let go. Noise is filtered. Chemical traces are cleaned and reset. Entropy would like to smear everything into uniformity, but life uses energy to keep some patterns intact a little longer. The fact that you can wake up in the morning and still recognize yourself, your memories, your story, your name, is evidence that this work is being done. And even where life is not involved, the universe keeps its own rough diaries. A glacier moves slowly down a valley, grinding rock into powder. The scratch marks left on the stone are memory. A volcano erupts and lava hardens into dark glass. Inside that glass, bubbles and crystals store information about temperature, pressure, chemistry. An asteroid scars a planet's surface with a crater. Long after the shock waves and firestorms are gone, the crater remains, filled with sediments that layer new histories on top of older ones. All of these are compromises between entropy and structure. The detailed information of the exact eruption, the precise trajectory, the moment-to-moment state of every atom, those fine-grained details become scattered, effectively unreachable. But broader patterns survive. Here was impact, here was flow, here was heat. Time smooths away the specifics and leaves outlines, mountains, basins, coastlines, fossils. You read those outlines as memory. When you think about your own life, something similar is happening. Very few days remain in your mind as complete, precise recordings. Instead, what lasts is a softer collection of shapes, a relationship, a skill learned, a fear outgrown, a comfort discovered. You forget almost everything, and yet the forgetting doesn't erase the effect. The person you are now is the sum of all those half-remembered days, all the interactions that shifted your path a little this way or that. Physics doesn't know about your joys and your regrets in the way you do, but it does keep track of the physical side of them, the hormones released, the synapses strengthened or weakened, the muscles trained, the letters written, the messages sent. Every conversation left little changes in the world. Words stored on servers, cushions indented, cups moved from one table to another. You won't remember most of the details. The universe does, in its own quiet language of positions and energies. Time, then, is not just something you pass through like a train station. It is the ongoing accumulation of these changes. Every tick is a new arrangement of everything. Galaxies shifted an imperceptible amount. Stars burned a little more fuel. Planets rotated slightly onward. Your heart beat once more. You and the cosmos move together in that flow. There is no way to step outside it and look back as an outsider. You are inside the river, and your splash is one of the reasons the water looks the way it does. If that thought feels large or heavy, you don't have to hold all of it. It's enough to let a small piece settle. For example, the idea that no moment is entirely isolated. The second you are in right now is built from all previous seconds. The shape of your room, the clothes you're wearing, the devices near you, the language in your head, none of it appeared spontaneously. Each is the result of countless prior steps, choices, accidents, and physical processes. Time ties them together into a sequence that can't be rearranged without breaking the story. This is why even stillness is not truly still. While you lie there, your body is busy. Cells divide, proteins fold, temperature adjusts, neutrinos pass through, photons warm your skin. Gravity pulls on every atom, on scales both tiny and enormous. Change is happening. Time is being written into you, and you are being written into time. Memory, in this wide sense, is just the name we give to the way the present carries the shape of the past. It's not always legible. Most of it is stored at a level we don't have access to. We can't read the arrangement of air molecules in our room and reconstruct every word ever spoken there. We can't look at a mountain and know every storm that carved it. But the fact remains, the present state is not arbitrary. It is the descendant of earlier states, connected by cause and effect. From that perspective, your existence is already larger than what you can remember. Every laugh and every silence, every time you turned left instead of right, changed the configuration of matter ever so slightly. Some of those changes will wash away quickly. Others will echo longer than you will. A sentence you said in passing might become part of someone else's turning point. A decision you barely noticed might alter a chain of events that continues long after your own memories of it have faded. Physics doesn't make promises about meaning. It doesn't guarantee that every trace will matter to someone, or that every pattern will be recognized. But it does say, again and again, that nothing happens without leaving something behind. A shift in entropy, a tweak in a field, a photon carrying away a tiny packet of information about what was. Forgetting, in this light, is not the disappearance of history, but the limit of what any one observer can hold. So when you find yourself worrying that your moments are vanishing as soon as they pass, you can remember that at the most basic level, the universe doesn't work like that. It doesn't simply discard. It transforms. Details blur and scatter, sharp outlines soften. But the influence of each moment remains somewhere in the tilt of an orbit, in the warmth of a room, in the contact between two people, in the way light falls on a page. You don't need to chase those traces or keep score. You don't need to catalog your impact or cling to every minute. It's enough to know that being here at all means you're woven into the fabric that continues, that nothing you are has been completely outside the story. As time carries you forward, entropy will keep doing what it does, nudging patterns toward dispersion. Yet within that drift, new patterns will form because of you, built from the rearranged pieces of all that came before. Tonight, as you rest, your part in that ongoing rearrangement is small and gentle. A slight rise and fall of your chest, the slow cooling of your skin, the quiet work of repair inside your cells. Outside, stars move through their arcs, galaxies rotate, old signals pass through the space above your roof. All of it is time writing itself, memory accumulating in ways you can't see. You're not separate from that process. You are one of the places where the universe is keeping track. If you could step outside yourself and look back, not with eyes, but with equations, you would see a pattern that never quite repeats. A particular trail through possibility space, shaped by chance and by choice, by physics and by feeling. No other arrangement of atoms has moved exactly as you have, in exactly this order. That uniqueness isn't something you have to earn, it's built in. It's what happens when a universe with so many degrees of freedom lets one small corner of itself become you for a while. For now, it's enough to let your thoughts loosen and drift, knowing that even as they fade, the world around you quietly adjusts. The bed remembers your weight in its cushions. The air remembers the warmth of your breath. The fields remember the currents that have passed. Time keeps moving, and with every soft second, the universe folds your presence into its ongoing memory. One more subtle line in a very old story. When a riverbank slowly crumbles into a new curve, the splash that began it is gone, but the shape that remains is a kind of memory. When light passes through a cloud of gas and certain colors are missing because particular atoms have absorbed and re-emitted them, that pattern is a memory too. When two particles meet and recoil, their new paths carry the mark of that encounter. Nothing has to write anything down. It remembers simply by being different than it was before. All of it unfolds inside time. You can think of time not just as a thin line, but as a kind of invisible medium you live in, the way a fish lives in water. You don't see time, you don't touch it, but you feel it whenever one moment refuses to be the same as the last. You notice it when you think back on a day and feel how far away it is, even though you can still recall it. The room, the conversation, the person you were then once, they were as present as this moment is now. Today, they exist as traces in your brain and in the world. That distance between the living moment and its echo is your everyday contact with time. You didn't create that distance. You inhabit it. There is no single universal now, stretched like a sheet across the cosmos. Instead, there are many nows, each tied to a place and emotion. Time is local, gently curved by what surrounds you. Yet inside your own experience, it feels smooth. You sense yourself moving steadily from one moment to the next, carrying a private thread you call your life. Along that thread, you build memories. You compare this night to other nights, this quiet feeling to others you've known. In that comparison, meaning appears. Things matter because of what came before. Time is the medium where that meaning settles. Even the smallest things use time. A particle on its way through space has a kind of story written in its properties. Its path, its spin, the rate at which it tends to decay. Those traits evolve. They aren't static. They mark a before and an after at the tiniest scales. In that sense, everything has a timeline. Stars brighten and fade. Rocks crack and wear down. Atoms are forged in some reactions and broken in others. Those timelines intersect. When you touch something, your history and its history meet. When you speak, your breath rides on air molecules that were already in motion. When you look, the light reaching your eyes left its source some time ago, carrying a bit of that past with it. You're not simply sliding through time like a passenger on a train. You're constantly leaving structures that did not exist before, a rearranged room, a sentence in someone's memory, a tiny chemical change in your own cells. That is what makes memory possible, not just in your mind, but in matter itself. Your brain remembers by altering its structure. Connections between neurons strengthen or weaken. Pathways become easier or harder to use. These patterns persist because the timeline doesn't break, it stretches. Zoom out, and the same thing is happening everywhere. The universe remembers through structure, not perfectly, but enough to build stars, keep elements stable, sustain orbits, let galaxies evolve. Quantum uncertainty adds variation inside a continuous unfolding. It doesn't tear the story apart. The wave function that describes a system changes smoothly in time. Measurements pick out particular outcomes, but the underlying field remains. If you like thinking of time as a river, you can keep that picture. Just imagine the water isn't only movement, but information whirls and currents that still carry hints of what disturbed them upstream. The past doesn't fall off an edge. It accumulates in the way things are now. History is not only what we write down, it's the physical memory of the universe, encoded in rocks and radiation, in rotation, and in you. You're not beside that timeline. You're made from it. The patterns in your body reflect billions of years of chemical evolution, biological adaptation, and planetary motion. The fact that you can lie here listening, feeling tired or calm or curious, is already the result of a long chain of conditions that did not break. You don't have to remember any of that. The universe has been carrying it in structure all along, not in a separate vault, but as continuity, as time. You've probably heard that your body is made of stardust, that the carbon in your cells, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood were forged in older stars that lived and died before Earth formed. It's true, but there's something deeper tucked inside it. Your body is made of memory. Not memory as in birthdays or street names. There are no photos in your atoms. It's memory as in a sequence of conditions that had to be met, one after another, for those atoms to be here. A chain of events so long and specific that stardust is really shorthand for an enormous story. Pick one atom in you, a nitrogen atom in your blood, a phosphorus atom in your DNA. It wasn't made on Earth. It was forged in the hot, dense core of a star that once burned somewhere in the galaxy. That star had to gather gas, grow massive, reach temperatures and pressures fierce enough to fuse lighter elements into heavier ones, then die in a way that scattered its interior back into space. The gas that carried your atom drifted through the dark, mixing with other clouds, cooling, collapsing again under gravity into a new disk of material that would become a solar system. In that disk, dust clumped into rocks, rocks into worldlets, worldlets into planets. One of them was Earth. On its surface, chemistry unfolded, atmosphere and oceans formed. Molecules met, combined, broke apart, and recombined in countless cycles. At some point in that chain, your atom became part of a molecule that life could use. It entered food or water or air, and eventually found its way into your body, into a cell, into a structure that helps you exist as you do now. All of that is folded into the simple fact that this atom is here, inside you. It is a record, not poetic, but physical, of everything that had to happen first. Your DNA is another record. It is a molecule that can copy itself with enough accuracy and enough variation. Its sequence is the current form of instructions that have been passed down for billions of years. Early life may have been tiny cells in ancient seas, copying and recopying their genetic material. Over time, some changes vanished, others helped survival and were kept. Those successful patterns built on one another until they formed the code that builds you. Your body remembers in shape and habit. Bones thicken where they carry weight. Muscles strengthen along familiar lines of movement. Your immune system learns the signatures of threats and answers faster the next time. These are physical memories, built into tissue and chemistry. They are what happens when living matter meets time. Even your senses are built from old solutions. Light-sensitive proteins in your eyes exist because beings that could sense light were more likely to survive. The tiny bones and spirals in your ears respond to pressure waves because, over many generations, those who could hear were better able to navigate and communicate. Your brain interprets these signals by comparing them to patterns it already knows. Memory is woven into the act of perceiving. Beneath all this sits a quieter, basic kind of memory, the reliability of the laws themselves. Electrons still hold the same charge they did in the early universe. Photons still travel at the same universal speed in vacuum. Gravity still curves space-time in the same way. That consistency is a background record, not of specific events, but of rules that have not changed. Without that, no structure could stay, no atom could hold together, no star could shine. So when you feel the weight of your body on the bed, you're feeling more than the pull of Earth. You're feeling a long story compressed into a single sensation. Stars that lived and died, elements forged, molecules assembled, cells dividing, organisms adapting, all of it resting in this one moment where your body quietly obeys ancient rules. You are not separate from matter. You are its current arrangement, carrying its history into whatever comes next. The story did not start with you and will not end with you, but it passes through you in a way it never has before and never will again. Underneath everything, at the smallest scales, memory becomes strange again. You're used to thinking of matter as steady. A chair stays a chair, a stone stays a stone. But inside, particles are in constant motion. They interact, exchange energy, change direction, form and break bonds. Each interaction leaves a trace. Particles like electrons or quarks don't think, but they carry persistent properties: mass, charge, spin. Those don't flicker randomly. They carry identity through time, a simple, stubborn kind of memory. And when particles meet, they don't just pass through each other. They collide or scatter according to strict rules, sharing momentum and energy, sometimes turning into new particles altogether. Afterward, the products fly away on new paths. The angles and speeds they carry reflect what happened in that tiny meeting. If you measure them later, you can work backward and learn something about the interaction they came from. Conservation laws of energy, momentum, charge are the grammar behind these encounters. They forbid outcomes that would break continuity. You can't simply lose energy or make momentum disappear. The universe keeps its ledger balanced. Because those balances are so strict, the current state of even a tiny system holds information about its past. Not a perfect script, but enough of a record that, in principle, the story could be traced. Matter does not forget completely. It evolves. It spreads information out, hides it in complex patterns, lets entropy blur the fine detail. But the continuity remains, written into the very ways particles are allowed to move. And somewhere inside all of that, inside the murmuring of particles and fields, the slow turning of stars, the rise and fall of your own breath, you are resting tonight, part of the same long, unfolding memory. When enough structure exists, something begins to loop back on itself. The brain doesn't just process signals, it folds them into patterns, and those patterns can refer to one another. You don't just feel warmth, you remember how warmth feels. You don't just see light, you recall where you saw it before, what it meant, what followed. That recursive turn awareness, touching its own traces, is what gives rise to memory the way you know it, as a feeling of, I've been here, even when the moment itself is new. Inside your skull, billions of neurons are constantly whispering to one another. Each whisper is a tiny electrical change, an ion moving across a membrane, a chemical pulse. When something matters to you, when it frightens, delights, hurts, or comforts, certain pathways are strengthened. Synapses grow more responsive. Proteins are laid down. The brain quite literally reshapes itself around experience. Those changes are small, but they persist. They are the physical side of remembering. Over time, these traces layer. The sound of rain at night might be linked to a childhood bedroom. The smell of dust might call up a forgotten summer. A certain pattern of light on the wall might feel familiar for reasons you can't name. Your nervous system is constantly matching the present against patterns from the past, and that matching is how you make sense of what's happening now. Meaning, in this view, is a kind of compression. Out of countless details, you keep a few that matter and let the rest disperse. Forgetting isn't failure, it's part of the design. Your brain cannot keep every frame from every day, so it doesn't try. It saves outlines, not blueprints. It lets the exact words, the precise positions of chairs and clouds and passing strangers fade, while deeper themes remain: safety or danger, comfort or loss, curiosity or boredom. Those themes are carried in pathways, in hormone levels, in the way certain signals flow more easily than others. The moments may be gone to you, but their influence is not. Every night, as you drift into sleep, your brain continues its quiet work. Neurons that fired together during the day may fire again in strange, looping sequences. Some connections are strengthened, some weakened. Some patterns are rehearsed, others let go. Dreams may be one way this feels from the inside, a collage of impressions as memory is sorted and reshelved. Outside of any story, though, what's happening is physical housekeeping. A high entropy day is being gently compressed into lower entropy structure, fewer, stronger patterns that can last. Even when you can't recall a dream, the work has been done. Sleep is one of the ways your brain pays the energy cost of keeping what it keeps. Against the pull of entropy, it repairs, rebalances, and rewrites. You wake up not as a blank slate, but as a slightly updated version of the person who lay down. New connections nudged into place, old ones trimmed back, tiny adjustments made to how you will respond to the world. You don't remember most of that process. Your body does. In all of this, your personal memory sits within the broader memory of matter and fields. When you remember a face, that recollection is built from physical changes in specific cells, which depend on molecules, which depend on atoms, which were forged in stars. When you remember a sentence someone once said, that memory is carried in tissue whose chemistry is governed by the same conservation laws that guide galaxies. Your private timeline is braided into the universe's larger timeline so tightly that you can't separate them. The universe, by itself, keeps an enormous archive of states and structures, but it doesn't know what any of them mean. Meaning arrives when a system like your brain starts to compress and label, to tell stories about cause and effect, to say this mattered and this didn't. You are not outside the physics. You are one of its results, and in you, the universe has developed a way of noticing its own traces. That noticing has its own memory. You can think back to childhood and feel how different the world seemed then, larger, quieter, stranger. Some details are sharp, the texture of a blanket, the sound of a hallway at night. Others are blurred, but the emotional color remains. Your brain didn't just store events. It stored the feelings wrapped around them. Those feelings are part of how it decides what to hold on to in the first place. Sometimes this is gentle. A song from years ago can make you feel suddenly safe, or bittersweet, or wide awake. Sometimes it is heavy. A smell, a word, a posture can call up anxiety or sadness before you know why. In each case, a present stimulus has lit up an old pattern. The past has reached forward through your nervous system and touched the present moment. On nights when your mind won't quiet, it can feel like memory has turned against you. Thoughts looping, scenes replaying, worries rehearsed as if that will let you control them. But underneath the noise, the same basic rule applies. Your brain is trying to make sense, to connect, to prepare. It is using its archive of traces to guess what matters now and what might matter later. Sometimes it overshoots. Sometimes the patterns that once protected you keep firing long after they're needed. They can be rewritten, but not instantly. Changing them takes new experiences, repeated many times, so that the physical structure can catch up to the insight. All of this work forming memories, reshaping them, weakening some, reinforcing others, is happening inside a larger world that remembers too. While you lie awake or drift towards sleep, the room around you is quietly storing tonight. The mattress keeps a small indentation where your body rests. The air grows a little warmer where you breathe. Dust motes move in response to your motion. Somewhere outside, leaves respond to wind. Clouds shift. Distant stars pour out light that may reach your window or may miss you by light years. You don't have to hold all of that in your mind. You couldn't if you tried. But it is comforting, sometimes, to know that you don't have to be your own sole witness. The universe is not watching in any conscious way, but it is registering. It is curving around your mass, warming around your heat, carrying forward the photons that reflect from your skin and eyes and hair. Even when you feel unseen, you are not unrecorded. Eventually, your memories will fade. Some already have. Entire days, whole years, may shrink to a few bright images and a general feeling. That is not a failure of you. It is the way a finite, energy-limited brain copes with an infinite stream of experience. Yet the fact that those experiences happened at all is permanently woven into the world's history. The choices you made changed trajectories of your own life and of other lives, of matter and of light. Think of someone who once said something kind to you at exactly the right moment. You may not remember the date or the weather or the clothes you wore, but you remember the warmth of being understood. That warmth traveled outward, into the way you treated yourself that day, into the way you spoke to someone else, into small decisions that shaped later events. The original words are gone. The ripples remain. The same is true in reverse. A moment of care you offered, perhaps without thinking, may live on in someone else far longer than you know. In their posture, in their courage, in their willingness to rest, you won't see most of the ways you extend forward in time. But physics quietly insists that you do extend, in altered states, in new patterns of motion, in photons and vibrations and fields that would be different if you had never been here. So as you lie there now, surrounded by darkness or the soft glow of a lamp, you can let yourself be small without feeling insignificant. Small things are how the universe keeps its memory. The tiniest differences in energy and position add up, layer after layer, into stars, planets, rivers, cities, and the life stretched out inside your chest. You don't have to try to leave a mark. Existing already does that. You are a moving point in a web of causes and effects that began long before you and will continue long after. You carry the past in your atoms and your stories, and with every quiet breath, you donate a little of yourself to the future in ways you will never fully see. That is enough. You are enough. The universe remembers you, whether or not you remember every piece of it. And tonight, it can be enough simply to rest inside that thought and let the river of time carry you gently onward. And if, in some distant tomorrow, no one remembers your name or the details of your days, the absence of that recall does not erase the fact that you were here. The chemical traces you left, the patterns you nudged, the gentleness you practiced or learned, all of it will have been part of how the world became whatever it is then. You are not a note written in the margins. You are part of the page itself, ink mingled with ink, line woven through line. For now, you don't need to hold on to any of this too tightly. You can let the ideas blur at the edges, the way lights soften when you half close your eyes. What stays will stay on its own. What fades will fade into background comfort. The universe will go on keeping its quiet, intricate record, and you, for this moment, are free simply to breathe, to loosen, and to drift deeper into the soft, remembering dark. You don't have to be alive to remember something. That idea might feel strange at first, because memory usually feels personal. You remember your first school, the taste of something sweet, the feeling of cold air on your face. It seems tied to awareness, to identity. But memory in the physical sense isn't limited to the living. It can exist anywhere structure persists through time. A rock can't think, and it doesn't feel. But if it's cracked on one side, that crack is a record of force. It holds information about pressure, impact, temperature, and time. Not in a conscious way, but in a physical one. Ice remembers the winters it has survived. Metals remember the stresses they've carried. Even dust, drifting slowly downward in thin layers, remembers the stillness of rooms no one has entered for years. None of these things know they are remembering. They simply are what they have become. What life does is add another layer. It takes the physical memory already present in matter and builds on it. Cells copy themselves with small variations. Organisms adapt to their surroundings, keeping traits that work and letting others fade. Over generations, those kept traits become a biological archive. A polar bear's fur remembers the cold. A cactus's spines remember dry deserts. A fish's gills remember ancient oceans. Again, not with thoughts, but with structure shaped by survival. Then minds arrive, and something new unfolds. Now there is a system that can not only change with experience, but also represent experience symbolically. You can remember not just that something happened, but also how it felt, what it meant, what you feared or hoped because of it. You can imagine futures that haven't occurred yet and test them inside your head before you act. Your brain uses the same physics as everything else, but the patterns it forms become stories. Stories are memory made shareable. They let one person's experience become part of another person's understanding. A piece of your life can move into someone else's mind without your atoms going anywhere at all. You tell a story about a difficult year, or a quiet happiness, or a strange coincidence, and as someone listens, their neurons change. They build a new pattern that didn't exist before, a new pathway that can be recalled later. Your memory has extended beyond you. That extension is one of the ways the universe's memory becomes collective. It's not just particles and fields and rocks and fossils keeping records. It's language and music and art and small quiet traditions passed down through families. A lullaby sung by a parent tonight might be a variation of a song carried for centuries, modified and softened by each generation. The original voices are long gone. The words may have shifted, but the comfort inside the melody remains, passed from throat to ear to heart, over and over. You are wrapped in more of this collective memory than you can ever fully notice. The buildings around you stand where they stand because of decisions made by people you'll never meet. The technology you use works because countless minds wrestled with equations, failures, and breakthroughs. The language you speak is the sum of millions of small changes, arguments, inventions, and compromises made by speakers who are no longer alive. Even your mannerisms echo the people you've watched, loved, or imitated without thinking. Culture, in this sense, is memory made visible. Roads are memories of where people needed to go. Recipes are memories of what people discovered could nourish them. Rituals are memories of what people feared and cherished and wanted to repeat. Books, recordings, and now digital archives stretch that memory further, allowing a thought from one moment to sit quietly until someone in another century pulls it from a shelf or a server and lets it bloom again in their own mind. None of this memory is perfect. Stories get misheard, details are lost, history is filtered through power, perspective, and chance. But the fact that it can persist at all is extraordinary. Physical memory in matter gives us the ground to stand on. Biological memory in genes and bodies gives us life that can adapt. Cognitive memory in brains gives us personal experience. And shared memory in culture gives us something like continuity across generations. At every level, time is carrying information forward. You are part of each of these layers at once. Your atoms carry the memory of stars. Your DNA carries the memory of Earth's earliest life. Your nervous system carries the memory of your own days. And your words and actions enter the shared memory of others. Most of that sharing is subtle, a phrase that sticks with a friend, a gesture of kindness that eases someone's fear, a habit you inherited from a grandparent and will pass on without even naming it. Sometimes the idea of being remembered by others is comforting. Sometimes it is frightening. Sometimes it feels irrelevant compared to the immediacy of just getting through the day. But below that, at a quieter level, there is a simpler truth. You are already woven into memory, whether or not anyone ever builds a monument or writes your name in a book. The fabric of the world could not be exactly what it is now if you had not been here. Think of a night when you laughed so hard it hurt, or a moment when you cried and felt something inside you loosen. The air around you vibrated differently because of your voice. Light bounced from your face at slightly different angles because of the shape of your expression. Someone else's heart rate changed because of what you said or didn't say, or simply because you sat beside them in silence. Those changes were real. They altered trajectories of molecules and moods and choices in ways that will never fully unwind. Even if the people involved forget the specifics, the effects have already rippled outward. Perhaps that laughter made someone feel safe enough to rest deeply. Perhaps that shared grief made someone choose a kinder path the next day. Perhaps your presence in a room changed which idea was spoken aloud and which one stayed quiet, nudging a decision, and that decision nudged another, and so on. The universe doesn't separate big and small moments. It just keeps evolving, one state into the next, with your life folded into that evolution. At the same time, you carry within you the memory of countless moments that no one else knows about. Late-night thoughts, interior landscapes of worry and hope, tiny observations that never became sentences. They, too, are part of the universe's memory, even if they remain only as traces in a single brain. Your inner life may be invisible to others, but it is not non-existent. It has weight in the physics of your body, in hormone levels, in neural firing patterns, in the way your muscles hold tension or finally let go. Because of that, caring for your mind, resting it, soothing it, giving it gentle input instead of constant alarm, is also a way of caring for the small corner of the universe where you happen to be concentrated. You are responsible for only a tiny patch of existence, but within that patch, you have more influence than you might realize. The feelings you cultivate, the memories you reinforce, the stories you tell yourself shape how you move through the world, and that movement shapes what the world becomes, even if only slightly. It's easy to feel, especially at night, that your thoughts are sealed off from everything else. The room is dark, the city quiet, and your mind loops on worries or replayed conversations as if they were trapped behind your forehead. But physically, even then, you are in conversation with the universe. Your brain is burning glucose, your heart is pumping blood, heat is radiating from your skin. Tiny electromagnetic fields are fluctuating around every active neuron. All of these are signals, and all of them are being written in their own way into the ongoing record of what exists. And then there is a softer kind of memory, the one that doesn't belong to physics alone or to thought alone, but to the feeling of being you. The way your body recognizes your favorite blanket without needing to see it. The way you can find your way through your home in the dark because your muscles remember the distance between objects. The way your breathing slows when you hear a certain voice, because somewhere along the line, your system learned that this sound means safety. Those embodied memories are not stored as sentences. They are stored as ease, as loosened shoulders, as a small unclenching in the chest. They are the nervous system's way of saying, "We've been here before, and nothing bad happened." You can let go a little. Over time, if you give yourself enough gentle repetitions of safety, those bodily memories can begin to outweigh older, harsher ones. The physics doesn't change. The laws stay the same, but the patterns in your particular brain and body do. You are not required to solve the paradoxes of black holes or understand cosmic webs in order to rest. You don't need to carry the whole idea of the universe's memory with you every moment. It's enough to let it sit in the background as a soft reassurance. Nothing you are is wasted. Nothing you feel is completely disconnected. Every breath you take is stitched into a story that began long before you and will continue after, a story told in atoms and light and gravity, and also, quietly, in the rise and fall of your own chest. Tonight, the universe remembers you simply because you exist within it. The bed has formed itself around your weight. The air has warmed around your body. The sky beyond the ceiling is still sending you starlight, even if you can't see it. Somewhere, signals from Earth are moving outward, carrying fragments of human laughter, music, static, and ordinary conversation into the dark. You are one small part of that ongoing glow. And as you close your eyes or let them soften, your own memory will do what it has always done. Distill the day into a few impressions worth keeping, and let the rest dissolve back into the wider world. You don't have to supervise that process. You don't have to hold on with both hands. You can trust that what needs to stay will stay in some form inside you, inside others, inside the quiet fabric of space itself. The universe is not a perfect archive, but it is a generous one. It keeps more than it loses, not in sharp detail, but in transformed influence. You are one of the influences it has chosen to keep for a while. And right now, the most important thing you can do for this small remembering patch of cosmos that is your body and mind is simple. Allow it to rest, to cool, to loosen its grip, knowing that even in sleep, you are being held in a web of memory far larger than your own. Silence is a frame that lets the signal stand out, a soft outline around whatever just happened. Without that frame, sensations blur together. With it, they separate into before and after, into this and that. In that separation, memory takes hold more easily. You can point to a moment because something in you felt the shift between noise and quiet, motion and rest. Your own life is full of these quiet frames. The pause before you answer a difficult question, the stillness in a room after someone important leaves, the gap between one breath and the next when you are about to fall asleep. Those spaces don't contain words or images, but you often remember them anyway. They are the hinges where change turns. The instant a feeling begins to soften, the instant a decision becomes real, the instant you notice that you are no longer who you were 5 minutes ago. In those pauses, your mind is doing something subtle. It is updating its model of the world, comparing what just happened to everything it has stored, testing whether the old patterns still apply. Sometimes, without you noticing, it decides they don't, and a tiny shift occurs. A belief loosens, a fear becomes a little less sharp, a possibility that once felt closed cracks open a fraction. You won't remember the exact second that happened, but the silence around it becomes part of the memory of change. The universe also has these hinges, these transitions marked by quiet. There were long stretches of time when no stars existed, just expanding, cooling matter. Then, slowly, the first stars lit. There are moments when a pulsar glitches, spinning a fraction faster than before, and then settling into a new rhythm. Times when a galaxy collision has finished its violent phase, and all that remains is the slow merging and reshaping of orbits. Before and after, divided by an interval where the rules stayed the same but the arrangement shifted. The cosmic microwave background is one such hinge, a long silence broken not by sound, but by transparency. Before that moment, light could not get far. After it, light could travel. The difference is not a noise, it is a clearing. The universe did not start speaking then. It allowed its earlier voice to be heard. The silence was space becoming open enough for memory to persist. On a smaller scale, your nights work the same way. During the day, you are flooded with input voices, colors, tasks, decisions, tiny stresses, and small joys. At night, some of that input stops. The outside world dims. The silence is not perfect, but it is enough of a change that your brain can begin to process. It can replay, sort, discard, reinforce. Sleep is the time when your nervous system uses quiet to write its diary, not with sentences, but with strengthened pathways and softened ones, with patterns that say, "Keep this," and others that say, "We can let this go now." That's why some thoughts feel different in the dark. Without the noise of the day, they seem louder, more insistent. But it also means that gentle ideas have room to grow. A small realization, that barely registered at noon can bloom at midnight into something clear, a decision you needed to make, a boundary you needed to set, a kindness you want to offer yourself. Silence gives those seeds soil. There is another shape of quiet too, the kind that sits between people. A pause in a conversation can feel heavy or comforting, depending on how safe you feel. With the right person, silence is not a lack, it is a presence. You can sit together saying nothing and still feel understood. That shared quiet becomes a memory in itself. You may not recall the exact words from that evening years later, but you might remember the feeling of sitting side by side, not needing to fill the air. Even when you're alone, there is a kind of companionship available in silence. The hum of distant traffic, the soft ticking of a clock, the distant echo of a dog barking, all of it reminds you that you live in a world where other lives are unfolding alongside yours. The quiet does not mean you are the only one awake. It simply means you have a moment to notice that you are part of something larger. At the scale of physics, silence shows up as gaps in data, dark patches in the sky, regions where we have yet to see a signal. Those gaps are not meaningless. They mark where our instruments reach their limits, where the universe is still waiting to be resolved into detail. In a map of the cosmos, empty regions are as informative as bright ones. They tell us where matter isn't, where light has not passed, where gravity does not pull as strongly. Absence is part of the pattern. In your own life, too, absences shape you. The things that never happened, the words you never heard, the support you didn't receive, the opportunities that brushed past and kept going. These are memories of a different sort, not of events, but of missing events. They live in the form of questions. What if someone had been there? What if someone had listened? What if I had been allowed to rest? You cannot point to a scene, but you can feel the outline of it, a hollow in your history. Physics cannot fill that hollow with comfort, but it can offer a strange kind of reassurance. Even what did not happen leaves traces. The way your body learned to brace itself, the way your mind learned to anticipate, the way you pay extra attention in certain situations, all of that is structure built in response to absence. It is not your fault that those patterns exist. They are reasonable responses to the landscape you grew up in. And just as landscapes can change, so can these inner structures, gently, slowly, with repetition. Every time you experience a safer silence, a pause that is not dangerous, a rest that is not punished, your nervous system receives new data. It begins to update its expectations. Maybe not all quiet is threatening. Maybe not every gap will be filled with harm. Over many nights like this one, that updated expectation can become its own kind of memory, a counterweight to older, heavier ones. The universe teaches this over and over in its own way. Regions of space that were once chaotic become calm. Places that blazed with star formation eventually quiet into soft infrared glow. Explosions settle into nebulae, and nebulae into thin gas, and thin gas into almost silence. The history of a place is not determined only by its loudest moment. It is also shaped by how it cools, by how it rests, by what is allowed to persist once the noise is over. You are allowed that cooling, too. Even if your day was turbulent, even if your week has been noisy in ways you didn't choose, this moment can be a small patch of low activity, a tiny vacuum where no one is asking anything of you. In that space, your body can begin to remember what it feels like to exist without immediate demand. Your muscles can learn, slowly, that not every minute needs a purpose. Your mind can experiment with the idea that doing nothing is not the same as being nothing. Stillness is not emptiness, it is retention. When you stop moving for a while, you stop overriding your own sensations. You let them settle into place long enough to be felt. The day's impressions can sink from your skin down into deeper layers where they can either be released or integrated. You don't have to know which is happening for it to work. The system is practiced. It has been learning how to do this since long before you could put it into words. Out beyond your walls, the universe is quieter than you will ever experience directly. Between galaxies, between clusters, space is dark and thin and almost perfectly still. And yet, even there, memory flows, in the form of background radiation, in the trajectories of drifting stars, in the faint pull of gravity that keeps everything somehow in relationship. If such a vast, seemingly empty space can still be full of subtle record, then your own pockets of quiet are surely full too. So when you lie here and the room feels silent, you can choose to hear that silence, not as an accusation, not as a void, but as a container. It holds the day you just lived. It holds the breaths you are still taking. It holds the old cosmic light slipping through your body and the very new electrical signals firing softly in your brain. It is not asking you for anything. It is making room. You are allowed to do the same. You don't need to have profound thoughts right now. You don't have to resolve anything. You can simply notice that you are suspended in a medium that remembers air, walls, fabrics, fields, space-time itself, and that you are one of the patterns it is currently keeping. Nothing more is required of you in this moment than to exist inside that gentle, remembering quiet and to let it hold you while you drift as slowly as you need towards sleep. And if thoughts still circle, if old worries rise up to fill the space, that doesn't mean you are doing rest incorrectly. It only means your mind is showing you what it has memorized most strongly. You don't have to argue with those thoughts tonight. You can let them pass through like distant signals, noticed but not chased. Each time you return your attention to something simple, the weight of your body, the softness of fabric against your skin, the sense of being held by gravity, you are quietly teaching your system a new pattern, that it is possible to be aware without being on alert. Little by little, night by night, that is how a different kind of memory forms, not the sharp memory of events, but the deep memory of safety, of moments when nothing terrible happened, of evenings when you were allowed to rest and the world did not fall apart without your watchfulness. Those memories rarely appear as clear scenes. They show up instead as an easier exhale, a loosening jaw, a thought that feels less urgent than it once did. They are as real as any photograph, and in the long story of your life, they matter just as much. For now, you are inside one of those potential memories. A quiet night, a listening universe, a body that has carried you this far and is still here, still trying, still learning how to relax. You don't have to hold on to this moment perfectly. You don't have to remember every word. It is enough that you lived it once. The universe will take care of the rest, folding it into its vast, patient archive, one more soft entry in the record of you. Silence turns pattern into meaning, and inside you, silence is never just a blank. It's a process. When life grows a little quieter, your brain finally gets space to work behind the scenes. Experiences are sifted, synapses are tuned. Some connections are strengthened so they're easier to find. Others are quietly thinned so they stop shouting in your mind. Most of that doesn't happen in the rush of daylight. It happens when the world around you softens and your thoughts have room to drift. Feelings move the same way. When you're inside something intense, the moment is loud adrenaline, racing thoughts, quick reactions. The meaning tends to arrive later, in the hush that follows. A quiet walk, a warm shower, a few still minutes staring at the ceiling. In those spaces, memory settles. Emotions spread out, lose their sharpest edges, and find where they fit in the story of you. Silence is not empty. It's where scattered impressions slowly knit into something you can live with. Even the things we build lean on that principle. In digital communication, pauses between signals matter. A gap of a certain length means stop, start again, new line. Not sending can be as meaningful as sending. In simple circuits, a stable resting state keeps voltage where it needs to be, so a bit can stay a 1 or a 0. In quantum devices, a qubit must be left almost perfectly undisturbed if it's going to hold a delicate superposition. Too much noise, and the stored state collapses into randomness. Over and over, at many scales, the same pattern appears. When a system is allowed some stillness, memory holds. When it's constantly disturbed, the record frays. Seen that way, silence doesn't wipe things clean. It helps them last. The fewer disruptions, the longer a pattern survives. That's why we tuck fragile documents into cool, dark archives and seal time capsules underground, not only to hide them, but to shelter them from light, air, and touch so quiet can do the work of preservation. Even black holes, which once looked like the universe's shredders, now seem more like extreme safes. New ideas suggest that information about what falls in may be encoded on the event horizon itself, scrambled into a language we don't yet understand, but not truly destroyed. Silence, then, isn't just a backdrop for memory. It can be one of its forms, a pause where nothing new intrudes and nothing old is overwritten, a pendulum slowing at the top of its swing, the sea hanging for an instant at the peak of a wave. Those aren't empty instants, they're transitions, full of stored energy, poised for the next move. You don't know yet what that move will be, only that it's coming. That readiness feels a little like thought, conditions quietly gathering until something new appears. You know this feeling in yourself when your focus loosens, you're between tasks, or your mind is tired of gripping one problem, and it wanders. Memories slide in, images overlap, possibilities rearrange themselves. You're not exactly dreaming, but you're not fully steering either. Ideas you couldn't reach by force suddenly surface in these in-between states. The answer that arrives in the shower, the understanding that drifts in on a walk, the tiny perspective shift that refused to appear while you were staring at a screen. A little quiet lets memory and imagination mingle, and something unexpected forms. If that can happen inside one brain, it's natural to wonder what happens inside an entire universe. The cosmos doesn't sleep, but it does move through phases, hot and dense, then cooler and more diffuse, featureless, then full of structure, dark, then lit by stars. None of this is planned, yet none of it is pure chaos. Each new state grows out of the last, nudged by gravity, temperature, and quantum chance. Over enormous spans of time, new kinds of structure appear: atoms, molecules, storms, cells, minds, each one a way of storing and processing information that wasn't possible before. Every dream you've had is built from this long chain of permissions. The very fact that your sleeping brain can replay, remix, and rehearse experience tells you something about what the universe supports: feedback, recurrence, complexity, loops that look back on themselves. Whether or not you remember your dreams in the morning, The capacity to have them at all is a record of everything that came before, laws that stayed steady, atoms that behaved the same way, ancestors whose nervous systems made it through long, dark nights. But every pattern, even the most beautiful, shares the same quiet law: entropy. Left alone, structure tends to blur, energy spreads out, sharp edges soften. At the human scale, that arrives as forgetting. Without repetition, a skill fades. Without retelling, a story erodes. Without care, a photograph whitens and cracks. At the cosmic scale, entropy points toward heat death, a future where stars burn their last, galaxies thin out, and energy is spread almost evenly across space. In that distant, cooled-down universe, the kinds of structures we recognize as memory would no longer exist. No stars to shine, no planets with oceans, no chemistry to build cells, no brains to sleep and dream. Black holes, if they formed, would slowly evaporate. The last particles would drift through a dark, expanding emptiness. From that vantage point, it's easy to say that everything is eventually forgotten, not with malice, not with judgment, just with time. And yet, even that picture has a softer edge. To say something is forgotten implies that it was once held, and that part is undeniably true now. You are here. The universe, in this brief era, supports you breathing, listening, wondering about it. You have already reshaped your surroundings in countless small ways. The air in your room is warmer because of your body. The fabric beneath you is creased differently because of your weight. The electrical activity in your brain has altered chemistry and emitted tiny electromagnetic fields. Those changes are real. They do not unhappen. Physics, as far as we know, is stubborn about this. Information is not supposed to simply vanish. It can be scrambled beyond recognition, scattered so widely that no single observer could ever gather it back. But the underlying evolution appears reversible in principle. That's part of why black holes are such puzzles. They look like places where information goes to die, and yet our best theories whisper that it must go somewhere, even if somewhere is a pattern we don't yet know how to read. From that angle, forgetting isn't erasure, it's transformation. A clear signal becomes faint background noise, but the noise still carries traces. A detailed pattern dissolves, but the consequences of its existence have already nudged what comes after. The future is never completely free of the past. It grows out of it, constrained and shaped by it. That constraint is another face of memory. Your own life works the same way. Not every moment will be something you can call back, most won't. But the person you are now is built from moments you'll never consciously retrieve. The way you flinch or relax, the way you lean toward or away, the tone you use when you talk to yourself in your head, these are the living residues of days and years that didn't seem important at the time. You may not remember them, but you are made from them. If you follow this thread all the way down, the question, "Will the universe remember me?" begins to soften around the edges. Maybe it turns into, how long does something need to last to be real? A second? A lifetime? A billion years? Does a memory have to be permanent to matter? The light that left your skin a heartbeat ago is already on its way outward. It may be absorbed by the wall, or slip through a window and vanish into the night. It may scatter many times, but for a brief moment, it carried information about the exact state of you in this instant. That happened. No future silence can reach back and make it unhappen. Nothing you touch is exactly the same afterward. Not a keyboard, not a cup, not the air in front of your face. No breath you take is neutral. It exchanges gases, warms or cools the space inside you and around you, nudges molecules that will go on to do other things. Your existence is not a static entry in a ledger. It is an ongoing adjustment to the universe's state. As long as anything of that adjustment persists, some part of you is folded into the world's memory, even if no one can point to it and say your name. One day, the specific patterns that make you you will loosen, cells will break down, the structures in your brain that hold your stories will disperse, the objects you've owned will change hands or crumble, recordings will distort and fail. This isn't punishment, it's entropy doing what it always does. And yet, by then, you will already have given the universe something it did not have before, your particular path through it. Every kindness, every mistake, every quiet choice to stay or to walk away, all of them shaped small regions of reality in ways that would have been different if you had never existed. That influence doesn't need to be remembered as a story to be real. It lives in changed trajectories, in altered habits, in softened or hardened hearts, in the way someone else now treats themselves because of how you once treated them. Your part in that chain is finite, but the chain itself can be very long. So perhaps the gentler question to carry is not, will the universe forget me? But, what is it like to be part of a universe that remembers it all? Tonight, you are one small node in an immense web of causes and effects, stretching from the birth of light to whatever comes after you sleep. The atoms in your body have been other places, served other forms, held other roles. The patterns in your nervous system are the latest draft of instructions revised across billions of years. The thoughts moving through your mind right now are this moment's unique arrangement of all of that history. You don't have to hold the whole picture. You don't have to earn your place in it. You already have one. You're not standing outside the universe asking whether it will keep a file on you. You are one of the ways it is keeping a file on itself in warmth, in motion, in brief, tender awareness. The memory you are making just by existing is as real as any inscription on stone. As you lie here, the universe is carrying on with its quiet record-keeping. Distant stars are sending out light that may never reach any eyes. Old radio waves from Earth are still expanding into space, thinner and weaker but present. Deep underground, rocks are marking time, grain by grain. Above you, the cosmic background glows invisibly, still whispering about a time before atoms, before worlds, before minds. And right here, in this small, private pocket of space, your body is cooling, your muscles are loosening, your brain is slowly preparing to let go of wakefulness. You don't have to make tonight remarkable or productive. The fact that you are here, that you have felt and thought and wondered, is already written into the fabric of what is. You can let that be enough. If your thoughts circle the idea of being forgotten, you can offer them this: nothing that has happened can be made as if it never was. It can only change shape, spread out, dissolve into other patterns. You are temporary. Yes, so is every star, but temporary does not mean trivial. It means you belong to a living universe, one that moves, that transforms, that remembers through change instead of against it. Right now, you are in one of those transforming moments. A day is fading, a night is deepening. Somewhere between them, you are drifting with all your questions, all your small histories, all your invisible impacts. You don't need to solve the mystery of cosmic memory to rest inside it. You can simply notice that you are woven into it already, and then Gently, allow yourself to drift further into the kind of silence where your own memories soften and the universe keeps quiet watch on your behalf.